Anger. Tory MPs raging after Boris Johnson threatens to sack Rishi Sunak as Chancellor. An explosive row between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak has left Tory MPs raging after the Prime Minister threatened to demote his Chancellor. Mr Johnson is claimed to have suggested sacking his Downing Street neighbour after a letter from the Chancellor calling for the easing of travel restrictions leaked last week. The Prime Minister is thought to have said Mr Sunak could be made Health Secretary in a meeting of No. 10 officials. The remarks are thought to have been made half in jest, with Mr Johnson not expected to carry out his threat. He is said to have been unaware the letter had even been written to him and was outraged the first he heard of it was in the media. There have been a number of clash points between No. 10 and No. 11 in recent weeks, with the Chancellor pushing for a greater reopening of society to help the economy recover from the pandemic. Billions of pounds have been borrowed by the Treasury since the first national lockdown last spring to help Britain through the COVID crisis. Mr Johnson's threat to now get rid of the Chancellor have left Conservative colleagues livid. "It's all beyond pathetic, and showing a lack of team spirit," one MP told. "Rishi has a ST job to do to try and keep spending on an even footing. The problem is, it's the PM's instinct to just say yes to everyone. All of it is unhelpful when we're still in a global pandemic and trying to rebuild." An ally of the Chancellor was even more blunt. "If he demotes him, he's only signing his death warrant. There's nobody else as good as Rishi," they told. "He's the most popular character in the government. I think he brings stability. I don't see why you would remove him." A poll of Conservative Party members published last week showed Mr Sunak has a net satisfaction rating of 74.1%, with only International Trade Secretary Liz Truss scoring higher. The Prime Minister's net satisfaction rating was just 3.4%, a drop of 36 points in a month. The popularity of the No. 11 resident is likely to make life difficult for Mr Johnson. The Chancellor is preparing for a tough spending review later this year as he attempts to repair the public finances following the coronavirus crisis. However, the Prime Minister has promised there can be no return to austerity. The friction risks putting the two men on a collision course later this year. Amid the fallout, a Treasury source said, the Chancellor is solely focused on securing the country's economic recovery and continuing to protect and create jobs. Prime Minister Boris Johnson reportedly threatened to demote Rishi Sunak from Chancellor to Health Secretary in row of the relaxation of holiday rules. The PM is claimed to have suggested the move after the leak of a letter from the Chancellor calling for the easing of travel restrictions ahead of the relaxations announced on Wednesday. Rishi Sunak was warning that the restrictions were damaging the economy and leaving the UK at a disadvantage to its European Union rivals. However, Mr Johnson is said to have known nothing about the letter until it appeared in the media amid claims officials had failed to flag it for his attention, or to put it in his ministerial red box, the reports. He was reportedly furious at the leak and considered the letter was trying to push him into action. He is claimed to have had an agreement with Sunak that a lot of the restrictions needed to go. A senior source told the newspaper, he said, "I've been thinking about it. Maybe it's time we looked at Rishi as the next Secretary of State for Health. He could potentially do a very good job there." In an open meeting, after ranting about Rishi, he then suggested the Chancellor could be demoted in the next reshuffle. Officials at the Department for Transport, who had been copied into the letter, were blamed for the leak, but it reportedly sparked concern in Mr Johnson about the loyalty of his ministers.